The country of Sofin, once a powerful and independent state, is on the verge of total collapse. Clouds were gathering over her future with the announcement of a new era under the banners of the mighty Delphin's empire. This moment in the country's history was overshadowed by tragedy. The reigning king of Sofen fell at the hands of a mysterious assassin known among the people only as the Reincarnation of Evil, a name that caused fear and anxiety in the hearts of all the inhabitants. Events unfolded with catastrophic speed, leaving behind only chaos and despair. In this new order established by the conquerors, many aristocrats who had once wielded power and wealth were demoted to ordinary citizens, stripped of their privileges and lands. Among such unfortunates was Leyland Ephron's father, whose family had lost everything. Leyland, the young and determined daughter of a fallen nobleman, faced a ruthless and unfair new world where, in order to maintain her status and power, she had to play by rules she strongly disliked. In this chaos where every day could be her family's last, Leyland realized that only marriage could ensure that she could inherit the title and become the support and head of her house. However, the very idea of marrying for convenience, submitting to the pressure of circumstances, caused resistance and disgust in her heart. Despite her internal struggle, fate presented Leyland with an unexpected twist, the opportunity to enter into an arranged marriage. This step, though far from the ideal of love and understanding she valued, could be the key to saving not only her own destiny, but the future of her entire clan. Such a decision was like a ray of light in a dark kingdom where every step could be her last. With this decisive and bold move, Leyland Ephron stepped onto a path full of danger and unknowns, but one that could lead her to restore her family's lost greatness. In the shadow of growing despair, under the cover of night, Leyland Ephron, the daughter of a demoted nobleman, turns to the mysterious organization known as the Ninth Night Guild. This place, shrouded in rumors and secrets, was the last hope for Leyland to acquire a fictitious spouse to preserve the remnants of her heritage and status. This unconventional move was due to extreme circumstances, as she was looking for a way out of the crisis her family had plunged into after their status in society had plummeted. While Leyland was daring to take this desperate step, her mother, gripped by deep grief and regret, couldn't hold back her tears. She berated herself for failing to marry Leyland off in a timely manner, which could have avoided their current humiliation and poverty. Leyland's mother recalled the moment when Leyland was only a 15-year-old girl, and her father had announced his intention to marry his daughter off to cousin Stan. This moment was a turning point in Leyland's life, as she, desperate to avoid such a fate, escaped from the banquet hall, thus opening the way to a more independent and unexpected life. Leyland, reflecting on the past events, realized that if her mother had insisted on marriage at that moment, her life would have turned out very differently now. She would be tied to the duties and life of a commoner, forever losing the opportunity to change her destiny. This prospect was no less terrifying to Leyland than the current state of affairs. So going to the Night Guild was not just a choice. It was a forced but conscious decision, dictated by the desire to gain control of his destiny and restore his family's lost dignity. Leyland Ephron, a girl whose age had crossed the 20-year mark, was a unique person in her own right. She bore the title of sole heiress to a powerful earl, which in itself placed on her shoulders not only the weight of nobility, but also the burden of expectation. But there was something in her life that set her apart from all other members of the aristocracy. Memories of her past life. In this past life, Leyland was an ordinary student whose life was cut short suddenly and tragically due to a car accident. These memories added complexity to her perception of the world around her, for she carried knowledge and experience not available to others. Being reborn into a family of high status and wealth might seem like a gift of fate to some, but for Leyland, it was a source of challenge. At her present age, when young ladies of her position were usually preparing for marriage and the continuation of the family, this prospect seemed to her extremely burdensome. Realizing the full range of responsibilities and restrictions that her role as the daughter of an earl imposed on her, Leyland sought to find a way out. Her goal was to find a fictitious husband, a man who would agree to a formal marriage, thus freeing her from the many social obligations and expectations of her status. This decision was not an easy one. Leyland was well aware that finding the right candidate would require not only delicacy, but also careful planning. After all, her choice was to satisfy not only personal preferences, but also to meet the strict canons of the society in which she was forced to exist. The search for a fictitious spouse promised to be a game full of intrigue, complex negotiations, and perhaps even unintended consequences. But Leyland was willing to take this risk for the chance to live a life that would bring her not only fulfillment to her family, but also personal happiness. The moment the door of her spacious, opulent office creaked softly to announce a visitor, Leyland Ephran looked up from the documents spread out before her on the massive oak desk. In the doorway stood Gelett Hayden, a tall and statuesque man in armor that accentuated his muscular build, typical of a seasoned warrior. His gaze was filled with uncertainty, which was uncharacteristic of the vice-captain of their family's knights, and also betrothed to Leyland's personal maid, Sarah. Such uncertainty in Geleth's eyes was thought-provoking, for he was usually characterized by determination and bravery. Gelett seemed extremely stiff, as if he was struggling with himself before crossing the threshold and entering the room. His silence stretched on, creating an airy pause filled with anticipation. He was clearly hesitant, for the reason for his visit, he thought, might sound offensive to Leyland, something he certainly wanted to avoid. With words that struggled to find their way upstairs, he finally handed over the documents, emphasizing the urgency of solving the issue of finding a fictitious husband for Leyland. His words sounded like a warning. If Leyland didn't make up her mind, she could face being stripped of everything she valued. At this moment, there was tension in the air, and Leyland, catching the unspoken suggestion in his words, hurriedly interpreted it as a hint that Gelett himself wished to become her fictitious spouse. When Gelett finally found the strength to speak and asked to be considered for a sham marriage, Leyland, gripped by a sudden fear of a potential change in her fate, hastily refused. This was followed by the realization of her own mistake. She had misinterpreted his intentions. There was silence in the room, broken only by the faint rustle of paper. Leyland felt a wave of embarrassment, realizing how far her own guesses had led her away from the truth. At the heart of their conversation, Gelett suggested a path that seemed both risky and promising. He urged Leyland to pay attention to the aristocracy of the ruling empire, who, despite all the internal storms and external threats, continued to display their power and influence. In this context, Geleth suggested using the services of the Guild of the Ninth Knight, a shadowy organization shrouded in rumors and secrets, whose reputation for selling information for money was widely known among nobles and commoners alike. This very guild, by all accounts, was the spark that ignited the flames of the war that once engulfed their lands. During the tumultuous events, the emperor ordered the unconditional execution of all guild members in an attempt to extract the root of the disasters. However, like many structures struggling to survive in turbulent times, the guild was given a second chance. Against all odds, despite the cruelty of the past, it has once again opened its doors to those who seek knowledge while maintaining its ability to work at its usual pace. Gelett, eager to back up his words with action, admitted that he had sought the services of the guild to obtain information about Leyland. However, he did not go into the details of the information he received, which only increased the halo of mystery surrounding his identity. His act of buying information without even being thoroughly familiarized with it indicated the depth of his concern for Leyland's fate, as well as a certain uncertainty about the rightness of his actions. The embarrassment that swept over him after his confession made him choose to leave, leaving Leyland pondering about the proposed plan of action and what secrets she might uncover thanks to the Ninth Guild. In the very heart of the Guild of the Ninth Knight, a place shrouded in mystery and enigma, documentation was found that was astonishing in its detail and precision. Among the pages, shimmering with darkness and carefully guarded, was information of such a personal and intimate nature that even Leyland herself was astonished. The description went so far as to mention even her menstrual cycle, charted with astronomical precision, including details that even she herself couldn't remember or had never thought of. This document was a testament to how deeply the Guild could intrude into someone's personal life, leaving behind only a shadow of violated privacy. Life in the Empire melted away a lot of freedom and fun. Love here was something like a free-flowing river that knew no shores or restrictions. For Leyland, however, such freedom was not so much admired as it was feared and worried. She was afraid that her fictitious spouse, inscribed in this world of free love and fickleness, might in the first week after the marriage go in search of mistresses, leaving her to wait for the unknown. These thoughts swirled in her head like a whirlwind, taking her far from peace and certainty. But then, amidst her dark thoughts and fears, a ray of insight flashed through Leyland's soul. She suddenly realized that it didn't matter what happened in this fake marriage, because its essence was unchanged. It was, and still was, just a game, a masquerade that didn't require any sincere feelings or affection from her. This realization seemed to lift a heavy weight from her shoulders, freeing her from the shackles of worry and fear of the future. She realized that her inner world, her feelings and experiences remain hers alone, and no external circumstances have power over them. Thus, Leyland was able to find peace in her heart, once again filling it with confidence and strength, ready to face any trials of fate. In the depths of Sarah's heart, swept by waves of grief and despair, one burning desire had awakened: to secure for Gellet a happy life, a destiny worthy of his kindness and tenderness. The tears sliding down her cheeks were not just drops of sadness, but symbols of the unwavering affection and boundless love she had for Geleth. Sarah, as if on the edge of a precipice, shared her pain with Leyland with an open heart, explaining that Gellet had sworn her eternal love, that she would remain the only woman he would love with all his heart, no matter the circumstances, even if their paths parted. This sincere acknowledgement was a test for Leyland, for the shadow of an inevitable choice loomed on the horizon, a choice that could change all the cards on the table. Leyland, whose thoughts were filled with resentment and anger towards Geleth for his decision, found herself trapped in her own emotions and responsibilities. She was about to face a reality in which her own future and happiness were on the scales of fate. Time ticked inexorably like sand through his fingers, taking with it the last moments before the inevitable choice. The carriage, ready to take Leyland to an uncharted future, stood at the doorstep as a reminder that a new chapter lay ahead, a page she would have to write herself. Sarah had not only opened Leyland's eyes to the depth of her feelings for Geleth with her words, but she had also given her a purpose. A year off to find a fictitious husband that would allow her to protect and preserve the family wealth. A year to guide fate along the true path and ensure each of them their happiness. It was a test in which Leyland had to not only fight for her own future, but also learn forgiveness, understanding, and perhaps find the strength to love again. In the heart of the brisk morning, when the sun was just beginning to dispel the morning mist, Gellet, with reproach in his voice, pointed out the possibility that Leyland could have sent him to get the information he needed alone. Leyland, finding herself in an awkward position, embarrassedly explained that given her own need for a fictitious consort to accomplish some unknown goal, it would be extremely strange for her to send Geleth on such a delicate errand without her presence. This dialogue revealed their relationship, where personal and business interests were intertwined in one complex pattern. As they approached the guild building, which seemed to be an ancient keeper of knowledge and secrets, they were greeted with some solemnity. The guard standing at the entrance, after a brief exchange of glances with the arrivals, rang the bell forcefully, as if announcing the arrival of important guests. In response to the ringing of the bell, the attendant appeared, his steps measured and calm, as if he had come not from the ordinary world, but from a place where time flowed differently. At the same time, at the back of the building, in the secluded office of the guildmaster, there was an atmosphere of complete opposition to the outside world. The guildmaster, surrounded by books and scrolls, sat at his desk, deep in thought. His gaze was directed at the empty spot on the shelf where his medications were usually kept. Phlegmatically noting their absence, He seemed a man for whom the slightest sound was a source of endless irritation. The medication did not seem to be able to quell the tide of his resentment, and in his heart, he was ready to go to extreme measures to get the desired silence. When Leyland and Gellet, the two key figures in this story, finally reached the door of the guildmaster's office, they could only guess at the storm of emotions that was building up behind that humble wooden door. They stood on the threshold, ready to confront a man simultaneously craving silence and irritated by the slightest rustle, unaware that their visit might have been the last straw in the overflowing cup of his patience. The moment the door of the guildmaster's office was barely ajar, a rough voice filled with discontent and irritation came through the crack. The guildmaster, in the solitude of his sanctuary, allowed himself the luxury of displeasure, reprimanding himself for the unexpected arrival of his guests. This explosion of indignation reached Leyland and Gellet, standing at the threshold like a wave, adding a note of tension to the already charged atmosphere of the meeting. As the couple got ready to cross the threshold of the office, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. The attendant, like a gatekeeper at the gates of a mysterious world, stopped Geleth decisively, emphasizing his status as a secondary person in this encounter. Leyland, on the other hand, being the main protagonist of their request, was let through without objection. This moment emphasized the hierarchy and rules that reigned within the walls of the guild, where every action and every gesture had its own meaning. The atmosphere in the office was saturated with a sense of invisible pressure, as if the air was thickening with anticipation of important decisions. The smoke from the guildmaster's smoldering cigar, lightly scented with lavender, filled the space, creating an illusion of tranquility that nevertheless could not hide the underlying tension that hung between those present. Suddenly, before Leyland's eyes, the guildmaster's finger lit up with a bright light, displaying his magic power. This act not only confirmed his high status in the hierarchy of the magical world, but also served as a reminder that he was no ordinary man, but possessed power that could both protect and destroy. The guildmaster, using his magic not just as a tool, but as a form of expression, asked Leyland a direct and open question about the purpose of her coming, which was the beginning of their fateful dialogue. Stunned by the encounter, Leyland felt a mixture of surprise and admiration when the guildmaster's voice, both sweet and filled with manly determination, reached her ears. His calm, confident actions, demonstrating strength and power, allowed her to wonder for a moment. Was she really facing the guildmaster, the very man around whom legends and myths are made? His aura, mixing unattainability and closeness, caused Leyland to doubt his identity, prompting her to take an unexpected action. Seeking confirmation of her speculation and eager to dispel the shadow of doubt surrounding this mysterious encounter, Leyland demanded the lights be turned on with a determination rarely seen even amongst the bravest of souls. Her voice, full of determination and steadfastness, sounded in the darkness like a challenge to the mysterious atmosphere in the office. She was answered by the guildmaster's ringing laughter, which had a spark of irony and perhaps even a slight admiration for her boldness. The laughter dissipated the tension, and the guildmaster playfully stated the simplicity of her request. The next moment was marked by a slight snap of his fingers, after which the room was illuminated by the light from a suddenly lit lamp. This act of magic seemed to shorten the distance between Leyland and the guildmaster, showing her that in front of her was not only a lord of shadows and mysteries, but also a person with a sense of humor and capable of easy communication. Turning on the light was not only a physical manifestation of his magical power, but also a symbolic gesture that opened the curtain of the mystery that shrouded their meeting. The majestic guild room filled the air with a special aroma of adventure and unexplored mysteries, among which the guildmaster, whose appearance could inspire an artist to create a masterpiece, stood out especially. His handsome facial features were accentuated by a barely perceptible smile as he pointed to a chair that could hardly boast of comfort. His hint didn't require any further explanation, but Leyland, unwilling to accept the choice offered, was determined to challenge it. However, upon meeting the guildmaster's gaze, she realized it was pointless to argue and instead chose the bed in the corner of the room as a place to sit. The guildmaster couldn't help but make a sarcastic remark about her choice, for even the idea that someone could find this piece of furniture comfortable seemed amusing to him. Leyland, surprised to feel the hardness of the mattress beneath her, had a hard time imagining how she could call it a bed. Her reaction only added to her points in the eyes of the guildmaster, who was already beginning to find her a rather interesting person. This feeling was especially heightened by the recent elopement of her estranged fiancé Stan, a situation that added a touch of surprise and mystery to their meeting. This exchange of views and opinions, full of unspoken words and emotions, created an atmosphere of mutual understanding and curiosity between them. The guildmaster, usually accustomed to more predictable and unambiguous situations, suddenly found himself interested in the opinion of this unusual girl whose fate had recently taken such an unexpected turn. And while Leyland had adapted to her new surroundings, she hadn't yet realized how deeply her appearance would affect the usual order of things in the guild. Amidst the thin jets of smoke hovering in the air of the room, Leyland felt a slight irritation. With reluctance to inhale the smoke, she asked the guildmaster to put out the cigarette. In response, he calmly and with a slight surprise in his voice, explained that he was not holding a cigarette in the usual sense, but rather a sedative intended to reduce tension. This clarification only added to the understanding between them, opening the door to a world where every object and every action could have a hidden meaning. The next question Leyland decided to ask was the price of the services provided by the guild. The guildmaster, easily taking the lead in the conversation, announced an unexpected offer. He was willing to give her a discount for the first 3 questions asked. This gesture took Leyland by surprise, for she hadn't expected that her quest to clarify the situation had already turned into a financial commitment. Her indignation at this only reinforced the guildmaster's decision that she would now have to pay even more. Realizing that arguing with the guildmaster was a futile endeavor, and recognizing his rules of the game in his domain, Leyland accepted the status quo. Then the guildmaster, whose mood seemed as unpredictable as his guild's rules, finally set the amount of the debt: 3 gold coins. This sum sounded like a verdict, emphasizing the beginning of their unusual cooperation and becoming Leyland's first step into a new world full of dangers, challenges, and certainly incredible adventures. In one of the mysterious corners of the world, where fates intertwine more closely than meets the eye, something happens that made even the air seem tense. The guildmaster, possessing the art of evoking a variety of emotions from his interlocutors, showed an interest in Leyland that could be described as artfully playful. His gesture, a slight and defiant waving of his finger, was meant to catch Leyland's attention, who, without hiding her indignation, responded to this challenge by sending 3 gold coins in his direction. The coins crossing the space between them seemed to carry the full range of her feelings, from annoyance to outright indignation. The guildmaster, showing not only his agility but also his confidence, easily caught them as if he had already foreseen this outcome. Lifting her chin, in a gesture full of pride and self-respect, Leyland declared that more respect should be expected from him. After all, she wasn't just a passerby, but an aristocrat whose position and background should have inspired a certain reverence. However, the guildmaster, having caught the note of demand in her words, reacted with laughter. His laughter was not just a reaction to Leyland's words, it was full of irony and sarcasm, as if he saw something naively funny in her words. By stating that Leyland was barely familiar with the reality of the outside world, it was as if the guildmaster was challenging her. His words carried with them not only doubt in her words, but also a blatant suspicion that she might not be who she claimed to be at all. As he recounted his doubts, he shared that he had repeatedly questioned his staff about whether Leyland could really claim the title of aristocracy. To this, she, without losing her dignity, proudly affirmed her noble origin. But instead of the expected acknowledgement, or at least a sign of respect, the guildmaster only increased the intensity of his laughter, making it even more audible and mocking. This moment, full of tension and yet genuine emotion, seemed to illustrate the complexity of their relationship, which mixed challenge, reproach, and perhaps a hidden mutual respect that had yet to be found along the way. In this tense dialogue, where every word weighed no less than a gold coin, the guildmaster, as if playing with the invisible threads of fate, decided to diffuse the situation by exposing to Leyland her own motives, which she assumed remained a secret. He accurately pointed out Leyland's reason for approaching him, the need for marriage to maintain his status and wealth. The guildmaster, as if leading the game, noticed that among all the aristocratic maidens seeking a lucrative marriage, it was Leyland who stood out for her uncanny resemblance to a rough street boy, which gave her image a special flavor and undoubtedly made her stand out among the other applicants. Interestingly, the guildmaster didn't stop there, suggesting that Leyland think about his preferences. In response to his question, she tried with the skill of a strategist to find out if he had a list of potential candidates ready to marry. To her surprise, the guildmaster was prepared beyond a joke. His list had 200 men ready to join their fate with an aristocrat. The guildmaster's suggestion of being able to choose a younger partner among them who would be easier to care for and manage caused Leyland to respond instantly. She immediately expressed herself by indicating that she was interested in a candidate in her early 20s. This moment was the key to their conversation, for it revealed not only Leyland's clarity and determination about the future, but also emphasized her desire for a partnership where not only social status and wealth were important, but also the personal qualities of the future spouse. The guildmaster, for his part, displayed not only an amazing awareness of her situation, but also an ability to anticipate her train of thought, which made their dialogue not only tense, but also extremely intriguing. A game of wits unfolded before them, where every move was important. The guildmaster, who had an intimate knowledge of the marriage alliance Artilex, confidently stated the difficulty of finding a suitable 20-year-old candidate who would meet all of Leyland's requirements, including the very delicate aspect of his virginity. This remark caused Leyland to feel momentary embarrassment, for she hadn't expected her hidden desires to be so clearly exposed before another's gaze. Confusion, however, was quickly replaced by determination when she confirmed the importance of this criterion for herself, adding another one to her requirements. The future chosen one must have a status no higher than that of a baron. Her logic was impeccable. She didn't want to waste her precious time trying to win someone's heart or attention, especially if it involved someone of higher social status. Leyland also didn't forget to mention that many soldiers of the Empire had recently been rewarded with noble titles, implying that there might be suitable candidates lurking in their ranks. The guildmaster, for his part, did not miss the opportunity to increase the stakes in this game, offering Leyland key information that could solve her predicament, but for the price of 3 more gold coins. This moment not only emphasized the guildmaster's cunning and business acumen, but also demonstrated his confidence in the value of the information provided. Leyland, on the verge of making a decision that could determine her entire future life, was faced with a choice: continue to pursue her quest for the perfect union by paying the asking price, or back off, risking missing the opportunity to find the very one who met all her requirements. In the flickering light of the hall, where every object seemed shrouded in mystery, Leyland shared her special requirements for her future life partner. She was looking for a man who did not seek power with a fervent lust for power, and who did not have a burning desire for children. The guildmaster, wielder of wisdom and patience, raised an eyebrow puzzledly, trying to find such a person in his imagination. He gently expressed doubt that it was possible to find someone who met such unusual criteria, especially if one added the condition of no lust for power. Leyland didn't hesitate to add another condition to her request, reflecting her aversion to greed for money, further refining the search circle. The guildmaster, whose face reflected deep understanding and at the same time bewilderment, decided to clarify one last time exactly who Leyland saw as his ideal chosen one. At this moment, as if the music had paused and all eyes inevitably focused on them, Leyland, boldly yet with a hint of shyness, looked straight into the guildmaster's eyes. Her gaze was filled with mystery and anticipation, as if she was seeing him in his true colors for the first time. A second dragged on for an eternity before she uttered that she was looking for someone passionate, someone bursting with energy and a desire to live life to the fullest. At this moment, as if off the chain, Leyland blushed as if the rising sun would color the heavens pink. This confession slipped softly through the silence, revealing to the guildmaster a whole new facet to Leyland's soul, revealing her true desires and dreams. At this point, the atmosphere in the room was saturated with unpredictability and a subtle sense of humor. The attendant, seized by inner anxiety and a sense of unease about the situation, suggested that Geleth, the knight waiting at the door, take a seat and rest for a while waiting for the unusual conversation to conclude. But Geleth, standing at the door like a statue, continued to wait in silence, unaware that the topics of conversation beyond that door involved discussions of male beauty and ideals. The guildmaster, feeling confident in this situation, and perhaps even a little flattered for himself, emphasized his perfect suitability as a candidate for Leyland, but she noted with a slight smile and without a shadow of doubt in her voice that looks, while an unquestioned virtue of a guildmaster, remained just one of the many aspects she valued. Leyland described her ideal marriage partner with very high detail and high demands. Even the bravest of hearts might not have felt brave enough to claim such a role. The discussion turned to a more serious topic when she admitted regretfully that she realized the unrealistic nature of her expectations. Leyland realized that finding someone who met all of her requirements and was willing to commit to a sham marriage seemed like an impossible task, especially in the limited time frame of only a year. This confession added a touch of melancholy to the conversation, showing that behind the bright dreams and high demands for a partner lies an understanding of the difficulties of realizing such ideals in life. In that heavy air, filled with the scent of old books and wax candles, the guildmaster sat, staring at Leyland with a gaze full of questions. He was more than just a leader. His words weighed the weight of gold among those who served the laws and rules of the guild. With all the seriousness befitting a man of his status, he asked about Leyland's servants, wanting to ascertain their consent to the unusual proposal that could change their lives. Leyland, a girl with a fate that had long since ceased to be only her own, dejectedly shook her head in response. Her head seemed to be filled with lead, so heavy was the pressure of the guildmaster's gaze exploring the deepest corners of her soul. The answer was simple, but behind that simple gesture were years of struggle, doubts, and dreams that now seemed doomed to melt away like morning fog. Another question followed, filled with just as much weight. Does Leyland plan to form a relationship with her future fictitious husband? She whirled her head around again, as if trying to push away the thoughts that were trying to take over her mind. There was no despair in that gesture. It was the response of a man who had long ago accepted his fate, but was still trying to find sparks of hope in it. She declared, and her voice sounded confident, as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice, ready for the final leap, that their whole arranged alliance would be nothing more than a contract. Leyland explained that her husband would be rewarded according to his status and behavior, hinting at a complex evaluation system that would take into account not only the material, but also the moral aspects of their agreement. But despite all the conventions of this contract, she promised that his remuneration would enable him to live in luxury for the rest of his days. There was more than generosity or nobility in her words. It was like a quiet acknowledgement that, despite all attempts to shield herself with walls of convention and contracts, human relationships still find a way to break through these defenses, leaving behind only questions about what really matters in this life. The moment the guildmaster questioned the reason why a marriage should only last a year, the atmosphere in the room seemed to thicken. This question made Leyland feel as if she wasn't just answering the order enforcer's questions, but was under the gaze of a judge ready to deliver a verdict. Her heart raced, and her mind began a storm of thoughts and excuses. The guildmaster, despite his strictness, admired Leyland's intelligence deep down. He was well aware that the task before her was not an easy one. To gain status in their world required not only intelligence but also cunning, the ability to be in the right place at the right time. In particular, attending the royal banquet that was held every spring was the perfect opportunity for Leyland to show off her marital happiness. At this event, she not only had to convince everyone of the authenticity of her marriage, but she also had time to secure an heir who the guildmaster felt might well be adopted. This move demonstrated not only her ability to make strategically advantageous decisions, but also her ability to act according to circumstances, even if they seemed impossible. After finishing his mental praise, the guildmaster got down to business. With all the seriousness that his role could imply, he declared that it was time for Leyland to go to the capital. This step was necessary for further developments and her personal growth in the hierarchy of their society. The guildmaster emphasized that their next meeting will be there, in the heart of political and social intrigue. With those words, he essentially kicked her out, pushing her towards the new trials and adventures that awaited her ahead. Leyland was left with many unresolved questions and challenges, but in her heart lived a certainty. No matter how difficult the trials seemed, she was willing to go through them, driven by her intelligence, courage, and of course, hope for a better future. Leyland felt genuine excitement as she voiced her request to the guildmaster, hoping that her words would stay between them. She worried that Gellet, whom she didn't trust, might have overheard this delicate conversation. She'd dreamed of a life partner who matched her idea of a hot husband, but she certainly hadn't expected her request to take such an unexpected and public turn. The guildmaster, after gathering his staff, put an unexpected question in front of them, proposing to marry Leyland. This caused a slight shock and bewilderment to the staff, as they could not understand why they had been chosen for such an offer. The discussion began to gain momentum as they pondered the reality of such a proposal, given that Leyland was recognized as one of the country's most enviable brides. No one wanted only a temporary union with such a woman, realizing that divorce at the end of the contract would be an unbearable ordeal for many. The staff, despite the initial confusion, was ready to offer a list of potential candidates for Leyland. They took into account her preferences, especially the uniqueness of black-haired men in their society, which made the task even more specific. And then, as if in response to the quiet doubts and musings, the guildmaster did something that came as a real surprise to everyone present. He threw off the wig that concealed his thick black hair, thus revealing not only his true appearance, but also hinting at his potential role in this unusual endeavor. This gesture brought an element of surprise to the situation and made everyone wonder about the depth and sincerity of their relationship within the guild. In the heart of the gloomy morning, when the sun's barely piercing rays illuminated the contours of the ancient trees surrounding the ancestral estate, Leyland's motherly words wrapped Leyland in a warm blanket of care and hope. The mother, with deep anxiety in her eyes, persistently persuaded her daughter to reconsider her decision, assuring her that the head of the family, her father, will be able to solve the impending disaster. However, Leyland, standing on the threshold of adulthood, full of dangers and challenges, defended her plan with unwavering determination in her voice. She was convinced that the answer to their prayers would only be found outside their county, in the wide and unpredictable world beyond its borders. With bitterness in her heart, but with undeniable logic, she proposed as a compromise to send the news to the capital, believing that words recorded on paper would be able to convey to the authorities the essence of their distress. Leyland, young and full of determination, at this decisive moment, crossed the borders of her home county for the first time, leaving behind not only her homelands, but also all the life she had known up to this point. Time passed, and after their country was invaded, Leyland didn't just accept the new order, but took on the heavy burden of ruling the invaded lands. When she became ruler, she believed with all her heart in the rebirth of these lands, that one day, when the smoke of battle had cleared, people would be able to return to a peaceful life, rebuilding destroyed homes and replanting ravaged fields. But on this day, as she crossed the threshold of her home once again, her heart was filled with anxiety and doubt. The feeling of uncertainty and impending change accompanied her every step of the way. Leyland relied not only on her courage and determination, but also on the protection of Gellet, her loyal companion and protector who was with her during these difficult times. He, like a silent shadow, was always at her side, providing not only physical protection from possible threats, but also moral support, helping her to bear the burden of power and responsibility for the fate of an entire country. Together, they stepped into the unknown, ready to face the challenges that fate had in store for them, while maintaining hope for a better future for their people. In the meantime, the guildmaster watched her carriage, waiting for the hour when he could reveal to her the true guise known as the Reincarnation of evil. For many versts, covered in a thin layer of dust and trampled by hundreds of hooves and wheels, the road to the capital stretched in front of Leyland and her small entourage like an endless ordeal. The sun had long since risen high in the sky, casting gold over the vast fields, when they found their journey abruptly cut short. Ahead, on a road that seemed to be an artery connecting the heart of the country with all its corners, the carriages of the aristocracy stopped in an unexpected jam. Gellet, whose attention never missed the smallest details of his surroundings, quickly figured out the reason for the unexpected stop. He informed Leyland about the rebellion raised by the local lord, resulting in tighter control on the roads. These words caused Leyland to have a storm of thought. She realized that her decision to take only a small number of servants with her, as opposed to the usual practices of the aristocracy, might have seemed not only modest, but also short-sighted. In this world, where the number and grandeur of a retinue often reflected the status and power of its owner, such a decision could expose them to a vulnerable position. Looking around at the surrounding bustle where everyone was rushing to pass the inspections and continue on their way, Leyland felt a wave of anxiety. She noticed the tension and anticipation reflected on the faces of the people surrounding their carriage. It made her realize that any deviation from the accepted rhythm of movement could draw unwanted attention to their small group. Perhaps that was why, upon catching the subtle scent of impending trouble that hung in the air, Leyland urged her companions to stay out of the general flow, trying to blend in with the crowd to avoid attention. She realized that under the current circumstances, any additional attention could be the seed of trouble better kept out of their already precarious situation. Surrounded by silence, pierced only by the slight rustling of leaves and the distant sounds of the road, the travelers felt an indefinable uneasiness that was slowly but surely creeping into every crevice of their minds. Leyland, whose heart was pounding in a soft but anxious rhythm, couldn't shake off the feeling that their carriage was being closely watched by invisible eyes. Suddenly, fate itself seemed determined to confirm her fears. The carriage shook in a sudden huff and then stopped. There was a characteristic sound that portended trouble. A wheel had fallen off the carriage. Gellet, whose protective instincts were always on maximum alert, reacting instantly to any threat, abruptly pulled back the curtain, creating the illusion of privacy and safety inside the carriage. He emphatically pointed out to Leyland the need to remain as quiet as possible, hoping to keep them safe from possible dangers. But even at such a moment, her heart was full of worry, not for her own well-being, but for her faithful coachman Chen, who alone faced the danger outside. As soon as Leyland ran out of the carriage, her gaze fell on a scene as if plucked from the darkest tales. In front of Chen, like a ghost, stood a swordsman whose weapon was flushed with blood. This man was known as the King's Assassin, a creature shrouded in legend and fear, referred to by many as the Reincarnation of Evil. There was something smoldering in his eyes that made the world around him freeze in anticipation of tragedy. The moment the Reincarnation of Evil stuck the sword in seemed to stretch for an eternity. The sharp blade stopped just a couple of centimeters away from Chen's head, making time seem to slow down. Leyland, who had unwittingly witnessed this picture, felt like a prisoner of her own terror and immobility. The gaze, filled with bloodlust and expressing endless malice, paralyzed her, leaving no possibility of action or escape. She stood, chained to the ground, gripped by fear of the power and callousness of one who could easily cut her life short. In this story, Leyland's heart was gripped by fear of facing death again. Suddenly, however, her keen sense caught a familiar scent that awakened hope in her. Meanwhile, a mysterious character known as the Reincarnation of Evil jumped off the carriage with ease. He pulled his sedative from his pocket and lit it, creating an aura of mystery and danger around him. Leyland, driven by a mixture of fear and determination, did not hesitate. She jumped up to the coachman, who was in a deep sleep, and began to shake him in an attempt to wake him up and beg him to leave immediately. But Chen, the coachman, was sound asleep, unresponsive to her actions no matter how hard she tried. Realizing that time was at precious seconds, Leyland made a decision, as desperate as it was. She grabbed the reins herself, deciding to take control of the carriage into her own hands. As soon as Gellet, her companion, was settled in his seat, she did not hesitate to pull the reins, and the carriage sped forward. That decision was made in a flash, leaving the Reincarnation of Evil behind in a cloud of dust and smoke from his cigarette. This moment was filled with the tension and determination of Leyland, who, despite her fear of dying again, found the strength to act quickly and decisively, showing her will to live and save herself. Within the metropolitan limits, where the majesty and might of the empire was felt in every stone, the imperial duke, a man of power and majesty, felt deep irritation and resentment. The cause of his mental turmoil was the return of Khalid, the very one whom many had unkindly labeled the reincarnation of evil. This man, clothed in a mantle of mystery and danger, was sent to distant lands with a mission that rose above ordinary concerns. He was busy searching for a fragment of an ancient star hidden somewhere among the green hills of Ephran, a land full of secrets and legends. However, his quest was suddenly interrupted. Messengers arrived with news that the emperor himself, lord of the great empire, demanded his presence. It was an urgent order that forced Khalid to abort his mission and return back to the heart of the empire, where every step echoed in the corridors of power. Meanwhile, Leyland, who had barely arrived in the capital before recovering from her adventures, was already immersing herself in preparations for the upcoming spring ball. This highly anticipated event promised to be one of the most colorful and unforgettable of the season. The ball, symbolizing renewal, beauty, and sophistication, provided Leyland not only an opportunity to distract himself from his recent ordeal, but also to reaffirm his position in the capital's high society, showing off his steadfastness and grace to everyone. In the heart of a mysterious and majestic city, where destinies intertwine as closely as its crowded streets, an equally intriguing scene unfolded. Gelot, a character with not only intelligence and cunning, but also a vision for his ward's future, has taken on the role of not just counselor, but protector. With a confidence that left no room for doubt, he announced that candidates who wished to win his heart and hand were already on their way to the capital. This statement was made with such precision and certainty that it seemed as if Gelot could see all the roads and paths leading to the city, as if he had spread out before him a map of destinies. However, time, that insidious and incorruptible judge, was unwilling to play on their side. With the audience only 3 days away, every hour, every minute was worth its weight in gold. At times like this, when fate seems incredibly fragile and unpredictable, Gelot again proposed a prenup. It wasn't just a way out. It was a precautionary measure, an effort to guard against the possible hardships and dangers that might lie ahead in the uncertain future. But Leyland, a girl with an indomitable spirit and a heart full of courage, wasn't looking for easy ways out. She declared that she could still wait. Her words were not only confident, but also hopeful. Hope that fate can still bring surprises, and that every candidate deserves to be seen and heard. However, Gelot was not a man to leave anything to chance. With his usual foresight and knowledge of the intricacies of life in the capital, he shared the troubling news. The capital, this great city, was going through some bad times. Clashes and disputes between people were becoming commonplace, which meant that even something as important as registering a marriage could be delayed indefinitely. Gelot was trying to convey to Leyland that if they applied for registration now, they probably wouldn't be able to get an answer before the audience. It wasn't just a warning, it was an attempt to protect her from the uncertainty that could hurt not only her, but everything they were aiming for. Leyland, on the verge of a momentous decision, found herself faced with an unimaginable proposal to marry Gelot. This choice was something incredible to her, for in her eyes, Gelot had always been more like a young companion, almost a child rather than a groom. Thoughts of what could have motivated Sarah to accept the role of Gelot's bride filled her mind. The situation was so absurd that Leyland couldn't find a logical explanation for it. Nevertheless, in the face of circumstances where the alternatives seemed exhausted, and given that Gelot was of age, it was with a heavy heart that she made the decision to agree to the registration of the marriage. After all, in her opinion, there were no other options left. At that moment, when the air was saturated with the gravity of the impending decision and the future seemed a foregone conclusion, something unexpected happened. The appearance of the first candidate for husband, as if a message from another world, broke the shroud of expectation and introduced unpredictability into their plans. It was a moment when fate reminded itself once again, proving that one should never give up hope. The familiar scent Leyland felt when the candidate appeared was more than just a fragrance to her. It was a symbol of anticipation of new possibilities and the beginning of something uncharted. This scent carried with it the promise of change and perhaps even adventure, filling Leyland's heart with excitement and anticipation. At that moment, she realized that fate had not yet spoken its last word, and that the path she and Gellet had thought was the only possible path was not at all. Waiting for the candidates, against all odds, had not been in vain, and now new horizons were opening up before Leyland, full of mysteries and surprises that had only yet to be explored. The moment the tension in the air became almost palpable, Gellet felt an indomitable urge to stand up for Leyland, preparing for any ordeal that might threaten her. However, Leyland, showing her independence and fortitude, gently but firmly stopped him, turning her attention to Khalid. Her voice, filled with confidence, cut through the tense atmosphere as she addressed Khalid's tardiness, emphasizing that their current situation was far from ideal. Khalid, not at all embarrassed by Leyland's rebuke, reacted with a slight, almost playful smile, as if the whole situation was nothing more than an amusing diversion for him. In his hands was a folder overflowing with documents and photos of potential candidates to be Leyland's fictitious husband. This gesture, although it seemed outwardly harmless, carried a deep meaning and importance to Leyland's future. Geleth, inwardly resisting but respecting Leyland's wishes, stepped aside with a heavy heart, allowing the woman and Khalid to discuss the details without his input. His leaving was not just a physical act, but a symbol of his willingness to give in when it was necessary for Leyland's good. Left alone with Khalid, Leyland, with her usual determination and attention to detail, began to scrutinize the proposed list of candidates. Her gaze slid across the pages, thoughtfully assessing every detail attached to the candidates' descriptions. She paid particular attention to the drawings that were attached to each questionnaire, realizing that it was in these visual additions that the key to understanding each applicant's personality lay. These images reflected not only the appearance of the candidates, but also their character, interests, and perhaps even their destiny. Suddenly, Leyland realized that it was this kind of careful selection and preparation of drawings that held Khalid back, indicating his desire for perfect precision and attention to detail that was an integral part of his character. Leyland stared at the drawing of one of the candidates as she thought about it. There was something mesmerizing about his features on the paper that made her heart beat a little faster. The thought of meeting this mysterious stranger arose. A spark of interest flashed in her eyes. However, with common sense and a desire to explore all potential candidates, she decided to continue browsing. At this point, Khalid, always on the lookout for an opportunity for an extra benefit, voiced a condition that added another layer of complexity to the process of choosing a fictitious husband. For every candidate whose information Leyland decided to investigate further, he demanded an additional payment of 10 gold coins. Khalid's words about the extra payment sounded like a cold shower, bringing an element of disappointment to her enthusiasm. Leyland's agreement to these conditions was given with gravity, for she realized that despite the investment, success was not guaranteed, and rejection of a candidate could come for any reason. However, Khalid, noticing Leyland's hesitation, quickly seized the moment to boost her confidence. His words declaring that it was impossible to reject her were spoken with such conviction that they couldn't help but leave a mark. When Leyland met his words with surprise, Khalid realized that he was facing a woman who did not fully realize the depth and magnetism of her own attraction. His reaction reflected not only his professional perception of the situation, but also his genuine amazement at how sometimes the most charming people can remain blind to their own beauty and the impact they can have on those around them. As Leyland flipped through the pages of the next candidate, her gaze stopped on the file of a man with a dark past. He was labeled as a sex offender in the files. Emotions flared up in her with furious force, and unable to hold back a wave of disgust and anger, she threw the folder sharply aside. This was followed by a determined cry of rage and a promise. If she had to face him, she would not hesitate to take out a pair of scissors to defend herself and her principles. Unfortunately, the candidate's appearance was deceptive. He had attractive facial features that could mislead anyone, regardless of his sinister background. Leyland couldn't believe that a person with such alluring eyes and a flawless silhouette could hide such dark secrets. In her search for the truth, She asked if the images in the dossier were an enhanced version of reality, if they were idealized to create a false image. Not wanting to dwell on the disturbing profile any longer, Leyland turned her attention to the following file. It presented a model family man who outwardly seemed like the perfect candidate. He supported 3 families at once, consisting of different wives who, as it turned out, didn't even know each other existed. This information struck her as unusual, and a man's skill at hiding such an important part of his life from those closest to him. This whole situation built up a complicated picture of choices in front of Leyland, in which each candidate had their own unique traits and secrets. As she approached the review of the last dossier, Leyland was overcome with a sense of unpredictability. All the previous candidates had left a trace of ambiguity and excitement in her soul. However, as she turned the final pages, she saw information about a man who seemed to emerge from the shadows of the previous stories. This candidate was an ordinary baron whose age numbered only 26. His description brought back Leyland's memories of a famous chef from her past life, whose culinary talents and charm left no one indifferent. The baron was tall and apparently possessed skills that made him look like a master of his craft, capable of creating culinary masterpieces. His history did not show a single scandal, making him an exception among the other candidates. In addition, he possessed the ability to earn money, which added to his attractiveness in Leyland's eyes. However, despite all his virtues, the dossier did not have an attached drawing, leaving the baron's appearance a mystery to Leyland. Khalid, her companion in this quest, opined that the first candidate would be the best choice, but Leyland disagreed with him. She felt the first candidate was too young for the role she was looking for. This remark emphasized the depth of her thoughts and her desire to find someone who would fit perfectly into her ideas and requirements, based not only on age, but also on the combination of personal qualities and abilities of the candidates. Leyland, swallowing down her doubts, addressed the question that had long plagued her thoughts. Why was there no room for number 4 among the top choice candidates? As her gaze slid over the pages of the dossier, her hands involuntarily slipped and she dropped the folder belonging to candidate number 4 in surprise. The name that flashed before her eyes, Delise Kald, seemed to call for her attention, increasing the ripple of curiosity. Kald, whose name now resonated in her mind, appeared to be a man with looks worthy of works of art. The drawings of him had finally come to her attention after a long search. She saw an image that made her heart beat faster, as if she were a participant in an ancient Greek epic. Disbelief enveloped her mind at first. Doubt tried to take over, questioning the veracity and authenticity of this visual evidence. However, when Leyland once again gathered her will into a fist and shifted her gaze to the drawings, her emotions burst out in a violent torrent, unwilling to hide behind the curtain of restraint for longer. She compared him to a Greek god, whose beauty and strength were steeped in legend and myth, surpassing any mortal's expectations. At that moment, to Leyland, Delis Khaled was not just candidate number 4, but the embodiment of an unattainable ideal, a symbol of those sublime feelings that only a select few could experience when coming face to face with a work of supreme art. Leyland, overwhelmed with excitement and desire, exploded with an unexpected confession in front of the guild leader. She expressed an overwhelming desire to meet Khalid, not even allowing for the thought of delay, and asked that a meeting be arranged within the next hour. The guildmaster, who had originally seemed to agree to her request, suddenly changed in expression. His lips distorted in an unforeseen grimace as he realized exactly who Leyland wished to see. He revealed that adding Khalid to the list of candidates was done more out of curiosity, without the slightest hope that he would get her attention. With undisguised surprise, the guildmaster shared that no one had expected, as if Khalid could arouse such interest in Leyland. However, despite his words, Leyland persisted, saying that Khalid seemed to be a very attractive young man in her opinion. Her words elicited an unexpected reaction from the guildmaster. He chuckled, remembering her earlier words about how a really good guy had to be hot. This burst of sincerity and humor instantly made Leyland blush with embarrassment. This turn of conversation emphasized not only the lightness and playfulness of their relationship in the guild, but also the deeply human side of Leyland, who, despite her determination and strength, remained open to new emotions and possibilities, even if it was meeting someone she knew only from drawings and short descriptions. This moment revealed the true charm of tweens in their world, where the audacity of desires and dreams are reflected in good humor and understanding. The moment Leyland opened her heart, admitting that her choice fell on Khalid, motivated by none other than his stunning beauty, the air between them vibrated with tension and anticipation. The guildmaster, majestic and unwavering in his authority, couldn't help but smile. His gratitude for the compliment sounded sincere, for such words, filled with true admiration and feeling, were rare in his everyday life, full of calculation and cold agreements. The guildmaster's next action was filled with drama and theatrics. He declared that Khalid's file should be destroyed. The dossier, containing all the secrets, accomplishments, and possibly dark spots in Khalid's biography, had to disappear to leave no trace. And with a snap of his fingers, like a wizard summoning flames out of thin air, the guildmaster set the folder on fire. The fire devouring the pages was truly a great regret for Leyland, as she could only guess at the secrets and stories contained therein, now lost forever in the flames. There came a moment of reckoning, a time when words gave way to gold, and the guildmaster, without losing his majesty, demanded payment for his services. Leyland, realizing the importance of the moment, did not hesitate to hand him the coins. However, only 18 gold coins out of the promised 40 were in her hand. This gesture, while showing her respect for the guildmaster's services and her desire to keep the situation under control, emphasized her persistence as well. With those gold coins shimmering in the light of the invisible fire, Leyland expressed another demand. She wished to meet Khalid as soon as possible. Her words sounded resolute, and in them was felt not only the strength of will, but also a deep, unshakable confidence that her request would be fulfilled. When the guildmaster, who possessed impressive authority and mystery, asked Leyland if she was familiar with the details of Khalid's professional life, anticipation hung in the air. His gaze was impenetrable, as if he was searching for more than just words in her answer, but a true understanding of the situation. Leyland, immersed in her musings and speculations, was at first strengthened in the idea that Khalid was a chef, a creator of culinary masterpieces who might have once graced her own kitchen as well. This illusion was built on dreams and hopes, seemed to lead to a desired future. However, when she heard the clarification that Khalid belonged to the 9 Knights, her imagination took a new turn. With ease, she switched to the idea that Khalid, being a knight, was trying to hide his orientation under the mask of his impending marriage. It seemed logical to her, because how else could she explain why a baron of 26 had yet to find a mate? This train of thought made her look at the situation from a completely different angle. But now the conversation took an unexpected turn, and Leyland was surprised to realize that she had made a mistake in her conclusions. 9 Knights was not the name of the restaurant as she had assumed, but turned out to be the name of a guild. The discovery was like a wave washing away all her previous guesses and ideas about Khalida. And then, as if out of the blue, came the guildmaster's admission that he was Khalid himself. This moment was a turning point in their communication, exposing the true nature of the situation and shattering all of Leyland's previous perceptions of him. Her imagination, vigorously painting a picture of the future, suddenly collided with reality, where fantasies and speculations gave way to the truth, so unexpected and revealing the hidden facets of their relationship. As Leyland stood in front of Khalid, thoughts and conjectures swirled in her head. She remembered that the dossier she had been shown had images of a man with locks of black hair, which was clearly at odds with the blonde hair she had noticed on Khalid when they had first met. This contradiction made her think seriously about what was really behind the discrepancy. Maybe the dossier was really created based on someone's assumptions or fantasies of one of the staff members, who may not have even seen Khalid in person or was too obsessed with his power. This thought moved Leyland to think about how appearances could often be distorted by someone else's imagination, or desire to present a person in a better or, on the contrary, worse light. With these thoughts in her head, Leyland tuned in to face the ordinary, a face that would not cause her to be delighted or surprised, but just another in a kaleidoscope of familiar and unfamiliar features. However, When Khalid took off his hood, the reality was quite different. Leyland wasn't just surprised, she was amazed to the core. Before her stood a man with unusually attractive facial features that would have looked magnificent even in the gloomy light or midday sun. His appearance was far more beautiful than Leyland could have imagined based on the vague outlines of the dossier. Her heart beat more frequently, as if trying to break free, meeting not just Khalid, but someone who had an instant impact on her feelings and perceptions. At this moment, Leyland realized that the artist who created that ridiculous drawing in the dossier was far from the truth, failing to capture and convey Khalid's true beauty. She even censured him in her thoughts for such an oversight, for in fact there stood before her a man capable of making her forget everything in the world by his appearance. In an atmosphere of lightness and banter, Leyland turned to Khalid with a question that might seem unusual to many. She wondered why a man with such outstanding facial features and figure chose the path of a guildmaster instead of conquering worlds with his looks and charisma. Khalid, without losing his sharp wit and humor, answered her question just as jokingly, claiming that if he hadn't taken up the affairs of the guild, perhaps his ambitions would have gone beyond mere existence and he would have set out to conquer the world itself, and added that Leyland probably wouldn't have minded such a development. Leyland, caught by the wave of his humor but still remaining slightly embarrassed by the directness of such dialogue, replied that perhaps the fault for his perception of the beauty of those around him lay with the sedative that made one see the world and people in brighter and more attractive colors through the smoke. Khalid, catching the notes of flirtation in her words, picked up the game and suggested with a smile that Leyland might be hinting at wanting to be complimented on her in this way. The conversation continued, and Leyland, without losing the received pace of the conversation, moved on to a bolder and more unexpected question, that of a sham marriage. She asked Khalid if he would be willing to enter into such an alliance with her, which was a rather unusual turn in their easy flirtation. Khalid, preserving the spirit of their banter, replied with a tone of genuine interest and graceful irony that without such a condition she would probably not consent to pay him. This dialogue, infused with playfulness and wit, created a special atmosphere of rapport and ease between them, where every word and joke only added spice to their interaction. As they moved on to the more serious stage of their unusual dialogue, thinking about creating a contract, Khalid made a suggestion that seemed very personal to Leyland. He asked her to communicate with him less formally, thus offering to bond on another level, which made Leyland's heart beat much harder. It was the moment when the formal barriers between them began to crumble, opening the way for a warmer and more intimate communication. Leyland, following this moment of revelation, decided to clarify one of the most controversial and sensitive aspects of their upcoming fake marriage. She recalled with slight hesitation that spouses traditionally shared a common bedroom and asked Khalid if he was ready for such an arranged coexistence. However, she clarified, for all that, bodily contact would be strictly forbidden, and as a result, she would pay him a lower amount. This condition was important to both as it set the boundaries of their interaction within the agreement. Khalid, not missing the opportunity to add a note of levity to their conversation, replied with a sly chuckle, clarifying that this rule of limiting physical contact would apply to Leyland as well. This moment in their dialogue not only emphasized the playfulness of their relationship, but also posed an interesting question about the boundaries of personal space and mutual respect within their future fictional union. Discussing such contract details no doubt added new nuances to their interaction, making their agreement both more complex and exciting. The negotiations between Leyland and Khalid entered a crucial phase as they moved to discuss the financial terms of their unusual union. Khalid, showing his enterprising and strategic thinking, proposed a condition that made Leyland take a new look at the situation. He insisted on receiving an initial allowance of 4 times the normal standard, arguing his immediate and significant financial needs related to their agreement. Equally unexpected was his subsequent demand for compensation at the end of his contract. Khalid expressed his desire to own the limestone hills that belonged to Leyland's lands. This condition stunned Leyland, for she was willing to offer many times the compensation for Khalid's services. To her surprise, however, Khalid convinced her that his demands were quite fair and that he wanted nothing more than that. His modesty in his demands and refusal to accept a greater reward caused Leyland to feel respect and perhaps even mild amazement. In the end, their negotiations, punctuated by sharp exchanges, humor, and unconventional terms, culminated in both consenting parties signing a triple contract that covered the terms of the marriage, adoption, and subsequent divorce. This document became a symbol of their extraordinary agreement, formalized in just one day, demonstrating their ability to negotiate and make decisions quickly. Thus, the contract was successfully drafted and signed, cementing their unusual union with legal ties. Leyland wasn't sure if Khalid was really happy with this contract given his passion for money, but it didn't matter anymore since all the papers had been signed.